Forget about being right. That's the amateur mistake. Most people lose arguments before they even start. Today, I'll show you the 6 secret psychological methods that turn discussions into checkmates. The winners aren't the smartest. They're the smartest talkers. Most people lose arguments before they even start talking. They walk into a discussion carrying a single heavy burden, the need to prove they are right. And honestly, who hasn't been there? After studying thousands of debates and getting absolutely crushed in discussions for years, I finally cracked the code, and here's the crazy counterintuitive truth. The winners aren't always the smartest people in the room. Think about your last argument, the one that left you feeling frustrated, angry, and maybe even a little foolish. You probably walked away thinking of all the perfect, brilliant comebacks, sometimes hours later, right? That feeling is universal. It's because we've all been taught that an argument is a courtroom drama where facts and logic should automatically win the day. But arguing isn't about being right. It's about being smart. The moment you start trying to prove your absolute correctness, you trigger a primal defense mechanism in the other person's brain. They stop listening and start forming their counterattack. The discussion immediately stops being an exchange of ideas and becomes a war of attrition. You can have the most meticulously researched facts, the most flawless logic, and the highest ethical ground, but if the person across from you is already building a wall, your perfect argument is just noise. The secret to becoming unstoppable in any argument lies in shifting your mindset from confrontation to persuasion. You're not there to defeat the person. You're there to guide them toward your conclusion. It's a subtle, almost psychological form of judo where you use their energy and their expectations against them. Today, we're diving into the first 2 battle-tested methods that will completely change the way you approach conflict. These methods are foundational because they disarm your opponent before they even get a chance to raise their voice. Method 1. The agreement trick. Here's something that will absolutely blow your mind. When someone attacks your argument, when they launch their heaviest criticism, don't fight back. Instead, do the one thing they least expect. Agree with them first. I know. It sounds completely insane. You feel like you're giving up, handing them the victory. But hear me out. Let's imagine you present an idea for a new project, and your colleague immediately says, "Your idea is stupid. It's too expensive, and we don't have the manpower." Most people would get defensive. They'd immediately start yelling, "No, it's not. I budgeted for it, and we can hire temps." And boom, the war starts. Nothing productive happens next. Here's what you do instead, using the agreement trick. You lean in slightly, maintain eye contact, and say, "You know what? You make a fair point about the manpower issue. It is a valid concern, and I appreciate you raising it." Pause right there. Watch what happens. They were ready for a fight, a clash, a heated defense of your idea. But you gave them agreement. Now their brain is completely confused. The adrenaline they built up for the argument suddenly has nowhere to go. They've dropped their psychological shield because you just validated their intelligence. You've taken their attacking energy and used it like judo. You didn't absorb the blow. You redirected it. Now that their guard is down and they are actually listening, because you proved you are reasonable, you pivot. You continue. But while I agree that the manpower is a challenge we need to solve, there's one thing in your statement that doesn't quite add up for me, and I want to challenge it. The potential long-term return on investment. By admitting someone is partly right, you instantly look confident, reasonable, and intellectually generous. You transition from being an opponent to being a collaborative problem solver. Most people are so thrown off by this move. They completely drop their guard and suddenly become open to hearing the rest of your point. You've used agreement to buy yourself the space you needed to make your real argument. Method 2, the question trap. This technique comes from the smartest guy in ancient history, Socrates. Instead of telling someone they're wrong, which, again, triggers the wall, you ask a series of questions that make them figure out the flaws in their own logic. It's like being a detective, not a prosecutor. Here's how it works in practice. Someone states a position. People who get good grades always get the best jobs. This is a blanket statement, and you know it's easily challenged. Instead of arguing back, "That's wrong. My cousin got straight C's and runs a successful company," you initiate the question trap. You start asking gentle, innocent-sounding questions that chip away at the absolute nature of their statement. So, you think high grades automatically make someone more skilled at their job. Don't you think other abilities like creativity or leadership might matter too? If someone had perfect grades but absolutely zero communication skills, would they still get the best job? Watch what happens. They start seeing the problems in their own argument. They might respond, well, no, not automatically, but it helps. Or, okay, communication skills are important too. You didn't attack them. You didn't call them wrong. You simply asked questions that served as little psychological traps, forcing them to argue against themselves. And here is the beautiful thing about the human mind. People convince themselves. When someone reaches a conclusion on their own, even if it was heavily guided by you, they actually believe it because they feel ownership over that thought. You become the helpful person asking for clarity, not the enemy they need to fight. You win the argument by never having to deliver the final blow. So you've mastered the art of the silent win. You've shed the heavy burden of having to be right, and you understand that the real game is about persuasion, not confrontation. You know that walking into a fight waving your facts is the fastest way to get an opponent to shut down and start digging a trench. But what happens when the criticism actually lands? What do you do when they hit you with a genuine heavy objection? This is where we move from defense to offense, using their own momentum against them. It's time to learn the judo flip, which takes their attacking energy and redirects it to support your argument. We're going deeper into those first two strategies, the agreement trick and the question trap, to show you how to truly weaponize confusion and calm. Method 1 revisited, the tactical retreat. The first step in the judo flip is what we call the agreement trick, but let's rename it, the tactical retreat. The secret here is timing and specificity. You don't agree with their conclusion, you agree with a small, undeniable piece of their logic or a specific fact. When they say your idea is too expensive, and the timeline is unrealistic, you don't just nod vaguely. You zero in. You know what? The timeline is aggressive. I absolutely acknowledge that pushing this through in 3 months is a risk, and that's a valid concern you've raised. Why is this so powerful? It validates their ego. You've just given them a small victory. They feel heard, intelligent, and influential. That instant hit of validation makes them psychologically more receptive to whatever comes next. They were expecting a brawl. You offered a handshake. It establishes authority. By acknowledging a flaw in your own plan, you demonstrate superior confidence. Only someone who is truly secure in their argument can admit a weakness. This makes your opponent immediately assume you must have a perfect defense ready for the rest of your points. It creates the pivot point. Once you've agreed, you've earned the right to pivot. Use the word however or but to introduce the counter-argument that completely overshadows their valid point. Example in action. Them. This whole new system is too complicated for the team to learn. You. I agree that the initial learning curve is steep. It takes 2 full days of training, which is a lot to ask. However, you're focusing only on the 2 days of difficulty and not the 2 years of saved labor we'll get afterward. Which do you think has a bigger impact on the budget? You see? You took their negative energy, the training time, and immediately used it to power your positive point, the long-term savings. They were ready to debate complexity, but you shifted the debate to value. You used agreement as a tool for redirection. Method 2 revisited, Socratic Jiu-Jitsu. Now for the next stage of the judo flip, the question trap, or as we'll call it now, Socratic Jiu-Jitsu. If the agreement trick disarms them, Socratic Jiu-Jitsu makes them defeat themselves. Instead of asserting a counterfact, you ask a series of questions that reveal the holes in their own position. The genius of this technique is that you never actually say you are wrong. You act only as a curious guide, leading them to the logical dead end of their own argument. The key is to ask questions that force them to define or defend the absolute terms they use. Most weak arguments rely on words like always, never, everyone, impossible, best, worst. Example in action. Them. We should never invest in any new technology. It's always too risky. Socratic Jiu-Jitsu. Question 1 defining never. Is there any historical example you can think of? Even one. Where embracing a new technology gave a company a competitive edge. Forces them to contradict never. Question 2 defining always. If the risk is always too high, does that mean you think the risk of doing nothing is 0? Forces them to acknowledge the risk of inaction. Question 3 the ultimate pivot. So, if the choice isn't between risk and no risk, but between managed risk and guaranteed obsolescence, how should we be thinking about the value of this one specific investment? Pivots the argument away from their generalized rule toward your specific proposal. Notice what you just did. You didn't give a counter-argument. You didn't provide a chart or a fact. You forced them to realize that their sweeping, absolute rule is fundamentally flawed. They are now arguing against their own answers. This is the ultimate silent win. You remain the calm, reasonable person seeking clarity while they struggle to keep their generalized, poorly defined position afloat. By mastering the tactical retreat and Socratic jiu-jitsu, you've built the foundation of true persuasive power. You stop fighting fire with fire, and instead, you start channeling the heat to warm up your own side of the discussion. You are no longer their opponent. You are their reluctant, helpful co-pilot, steering them toward the conclusion you wanted all along. If you can learn to control your words and master your presence in a high-stakes argument, imagine what you can do for your entire life. These methods are just the start of taking control of your communication, your confidence, and your outcomes. But true persuasion starts with unshakable self-belief. Ready to not just win arguments, but completely upgrade your entire life. My new ebook, 30 Days to a Better You, is your comprehensive guide to mastering the mindset and daily habits that build genuine confidence, emotional intelligence, and relentless personal discipline. Stop reacting and start leading your life. Click the link below to get 30 days to a better you and start your transformation today. You've mastered the judo flip. You know how to agree just enough to disarm your opponent and how to use questions to make them critique their own position. You're winning arguments without ever raising your voice. But now we enter the most subtle and powerful realm of persuasion, the words themselves. Most people treat language like a blunt instrument. They use phrases designed to attack, criticize, or assert dominance. But the true masters of argument treat language like an architect treats structural steel. Every piece must be precisely chosen and placed to support the overall structure. It's time to become the language architect, learning how small word swaps and specific phrases can completely change the psychological dynamic of any conversation. Method 3. Magic word swaps. The words you choose can make or break your argument, often determining if the discussion ends in a slammed door or a new agreement. Small changes create massive differences in how your message is received. The I feel shield never say, you're wrong. The single fastest way to shut down communication and start a fight is to tell someone, you are wrong, or you are being ridiculous. These phrases are direct assaults on their intelligence and their ego. They immediately put the listener into a defensive fight-or-flight state. The trick? De-escalate the conflict by internalizing the complaint. Instead of judging their logic, describe your internal reaction to their logic. Instead OF. You're being ridiculous, and your logic is terrible. SA. I feel frustrated by this logic, and I feel confused about how that conclusion connects to your previous point. Watch that difference. The first one, you're being ridiculous, starts a war by making a definitive, critical statement about them. The second one, I feel confused, starts a conversation. It's an assertion about you that they cannot argue with. They can't tell you, no, you don't feel confused. They are forced to engage with your state, which means they have to re-explain their logic, giving you another chance to find its flaw. You've transformed an accusation into an invitation. The universe will nudge the power of common sense language. Want people to agree with your point without even stopping to think about it. Use words that make your point sound like common sense or established knowledge. These are the universal nudges. Words like, obviously, clearly, everyone knows, or as we've established, act as subtle psychological pressure. They suggest that anyone who disagrees is either uninformed or slightly out of touch, weaker. I think we should save money in the budget next quarter, stronger. Obviously, saving money in the budget next quarter makes sense, given the current market climate. The second statement is sticky. If someone argues against it, they are arguing against what is obvious to everyone. You are essentially borrowing the weight of universal consensus to support your individual opinion. The compliance chain questions with only one answer. This is a subtle but powerful technique designed to get your opponent into a pattern of nodding and agreeing. Before you launch into your main, controversial point, ask them a preliminary question that they are guaranteed to answer yes to. Wouldn't you agree that being healthy is important? Of course, they say yes. We can both agree that the purpose of this company is to maximize profit, correct? Of course, they say yes. Every time they say yes, you are building a small, internal bridge of compliance. They are physically nodding along with you. When you eventually present your more challenging or debatable point, their brain is already in a receptive, agreeable state. They are literally conditioned to keep saying yes. Method 4. The information bomb. Sometimes subtlety isn't enough. Sometimes you need to overwhelm them with the sheer gravity of your preparation. This is where we deploy the information bomb. A tactic designed to make your opponent feel outgunned by pure, concentrated data. When someone challenges you or asks for proof, you hit them with so many facts, figures, and data points that their brain can't keep up. This isn't just reciting one strong fact. It's a rapid-fire sequence of dense information designed to create a sense of intellectual drowning. Example in action responding to a challenge on a new investment. Have you looked at the 23% failure rate of our current system? What about the current Q3 market data showing competitor XYZ's 15% revenue growth using this exact same solution? Did you see the expert feedback and the long-term projections from the internal risk analysis showing a 5-year ROI of 180%? Plus, the new regulatory compliance window closes in 90 days, making this the only viable option that meets the deadline. Here is the secret psychological effect. Cognitive overload. Their brain is trying to process 23% failure rate, Q3 market data, 15% revenue growth, expert feedback, and 90-day compliance window all at once. This massive influx of specific domain-relevant data causes their critical thinking circuits to temporarily shut down. Assumption of correctness. They feel completely outgunned and assume, I must be wrong, because this person knows so much more than I do. They surrender based not on analyzing the data, but on the sheer volume and velocity of the data. Crucially, the facts don't all need to be 100% perfectly detailed. You just need enough correct, relevant pieces of information to create that sense of drowning. When someone can't respond to everything, they usually don't respond to anything. They simply retreat, ceding the argument to the person who appeared most prepared. You win by being, or at least sounding, the most informed person in the room. You've built your persuasive structure. You know how to disarm with agreement and redirect with Socratic questions. You're an architect of language, carefully choosing words that invite consensus rather than confrontation. But what happens when you need to go beyond the finesse and deliver a knockout punch? What techniques give your argument the weight, structure, and sheer volume needed to feel absolutely undeniable? It's time to combine the structural weapons, the information bomb, which we've touched on, and the subtle psychological anchor known as the magic number 3. Together, they transform your argument from a simple assertion into a comprehensive, professional, and entirely overwhelming presentation. Method 4 revisited. The data deluge. We previously introduced the information bomb as a way to create cognitive overload. Let's look at how to deliver it with maximum persuasive force. This method is crucial when dealing with skeptics, engineers, or people who rely heavily on logic and empiricism. The mistake most people make is presenting data piecemeal. They'll offer one fact, wait for a challenge, offer another fact, and so on. This gives the opponent time to analyze and rebut each point individually. The data deluge requires a rapid-fire, high-density delivery, creating the sense of an inescapable wall of evidence. The delivery sequence. To maximize the impact, structure your information bomb to hit different cognitive centers in quick succession. The hard number. Start with an undisputed, specific statistic 23%. The social proof. Follow up with external validation, competitor success, or expert consensus. The financial stake. Immediately introduce the dollar and cents consequence, ROI, or cost savings. The time pressure. Conclude with a deadline or regulatory mandate, forcing immediate decision. When delivered in this sequence, the brain attempts to track 4 different high-stakes concepts at once, leading to cognitive overload. Example: defending a budget increase. Based on our internal tracking, the current Q4 churn rate hit a disastrous 15.8%. This is happening while major industry analysts agree that our competitors, who invested in this software last year, are seeing a 12% increase in customer lifetime value. If we don't approve the $250,000 budget now, our internal projections show we will lose an additional $400,000 in recoverable revenue over the next 6 months. The time for deliberation is over. You didn't debate the value of the software. You simply laid out the catastrophic consequences of not buying it, using a dizzying array of external references, internal figures, and financial impacts. The opponent is left feeling not that they disagree with you, but that they simply lack the necessary information to challenge you. They assume your conclusion must be correct because you've demonstrated superior knowledge. Method 5. The magic number 3. This is perhaps the most simple, yet most psychologically profound, method in the entire arsenal. Here is something weird about human brains. We think groups of 3 things are complete, stable, and trustworthy. 1 reason feels weak or arbitrary. 2 reasons feel incomplete or like you gave up halfway. 3 reasons feel perfect, comprehensive, and exhaustive. This isn't just about arguments. It's baked into our culture. Mind, body, spirit. Red, white, and blue. Stop, look, and listen. The brain processes a triad as a complete unit, suggesting structure, clarity, and thoughtful preparation. How to structure your triad. Always give 3 reasons, 3 examples, 3 benefits, or 3 counterpoints. It makes you sound prepared, professional, and thorough. Presenting a plan. This new plan will work because it will save money, it will improve results, and it will make everyone happier. A perfect, balanced trio. Giving a counter-argument. I disagree with that proposal for 3 key reasons. It's financially risky, it's logistically expensive, and the timing is completely wrong. Highlighting a flaw. Here are 3 undeniable examples of why that won't work. The system failed during last week's test. The vendor has a known history of delays, and we haven't allocated the necessary team to manage the rollout. The psychological edge. Why does the rule of 3 work so well? Completeness. It feels like you've covered every angle. Your audience thinks they thought this through completely. There can't be a 4th reason. Structure and clarity. The human brain loves order. 3 points are easy to hold in working memory and are therefore easier to believe and recall. Professionalism. Most people only ever prepare 1 or 2 points and then stumble. When you consistently deliver a concise, structured triad, you sound exponentially more organized and prepared than everyone else in the room. The magic number 3 adds an unspoken layer of authority to your words. It transforms your assertion from an opinion into a formalized, structured position. By fusing the structural integrity of the magic number 3 with the overwhelming force of the data deluge, you ensure that your arguments are not only well supported, but are also delivered with a psychological impact that makes them almost impossible to rebut effectively. You've given them too much to process, packaged perfectly for maximum belief. You are now a formidable opponent in any discussion. You've mastered the tactical retreat to disarm, Socratic jujitsu to redirect, the language architect to build consensus, and the combined force of the data deluge and the magic number 3 to create an undeniable, structured argument. You've earned your place among the persuasive elite. But there is one final, ultimate technique reserved for the moments when you don't just want to win, you want to dominate. This is the method that doesn't just score a point. It ends the game entirely. It's the rhetorical equivalent of a perfectly placed checkmate, the conversation killer. Method 6. The conversation killer. The conversation killer is not about being mean, yelling, or resorting to insults. It is about being devastatingly smart. It's one perfectly timed line that completely shuts down your opponent's argument and leaves them genuinely speechless. It doesn't just win the argument. It exposes a fundamental, obvious flaw in their logic, their credibility, or their consistency. A flaw so clear that everyone in the room sees it immediately. The best conversation killers are short and punchy. They must be delivered quickly and without hesitation. Logic-focused. They attack the structure or source of the argument, not the person. Delivered calmly. The line must be delivered with supreme confidence and an almost bored tranquility. The lack of emotional outburst makes the burn sting even more. 3 types of killers. To be prepared, you need a few archetypes ready to deploy based on the situation. The credibility killer, the practice what you preach tactic. This line exposes a gap between your opponent's advice or position and their actual actions or experience. It questions the very authority they claim to possess. Scenario. A colleague with a history of missed deadlines argues passionately for an aggressive, fast-paced timeline for your project. Them. We must push this timeline up by 4 weeks. It's the only way to succeed. You delivering the killer. That's interesting advice from someone who's never actually hit an internal deadline, OR. You delivering the killer. If that strategy is so good, why hasn't it worked in your own division? This immediately shifts the focus from the merit of the argument to the integrity of the arguer. The point they just made is now irrelevant because the source is compromised. They have no good response. The logic killer, the pointing out the obvious tactic. This is the cleanest, most powerful type. It uses your opponent's own words or a commonly known fact to reveal their hypocrisy or massive oversight. Scenario. Someone presents a wildly enthusiastic proposal for a risky, unproven investment, claiming it's a sure thing. Them. This product has 0 downside. It's guaranteed to make us rich. You delivering the killer. If this investment is so guaranteed and so brilliant, why is it being offered to us instead of the people who created it? OR. You delivering the killer. I love how confident you sound about something you clearly only read about 5 minutes ago. This technique works by pointing out a flaw so obvious, like the difference between theory and practice, that everyone present sees the argument collapse. The reversal killer, the turning the weapon tactic. This is the hardest to execute. It uses the structure or tone of their attack and immediately flips it back onto them, showing their aggression is misplaced. Scenario. Your opponent is using a highly condescending or overly dramatic tone to dismiss your well-researched idea. Them. In a mocking voice, oh, look, the amateur is back with his pie-in-the-sky ideas. Next. You delivering the killer, calm and direct. The only thing pie in the sky here is the assumption that that is an appropriate way to address a $20 million proposal. The focus shifts instantly from your idea to their unprofessional behavior. You win by forcing them to defend their poor conduct rather than letting them attack your substance. The unstoppable combination. Here's what separates the pros from the amateurs. You don't just use one method, you combine them. Persuasion is a dynamic sport. You must adapt to the situation. Start with the agreement trick method 1 to lower their guard. That's a valid concern about the timeline. Use the magic number 3 method 5 to make your point sound complete, but the long-term benefits are threefold: cost, efficiency, and market share. Deploy the information bomb method 4 if they challenge you on facts. The data shows a 15% ROI over 3 years, whereas the current system is losing 2% annually. Keep the conversation killer method 6 ready for the perfect moment. If they resort to personal attacks or wild exaggeration, you shut it down immediately with a short, logical strike. The most important rule is to read the room. Everyone reacts differently. Some people are overwhelmed by data bomb. Others react to ego validation agreement, and others crumble when their logic is questioned killer. The ability to seamlessly switch between these methods based on what is happening is what will make you truly unstoppable in any discussion. Now you know the exact same techniques that changed my life. But knowing them isn't enough. You need to practice. Pick one method, maybe the agreement trick first, and try it in your next conversation. Start small, get comfortable, then add more techniques to your arsenal. Game over.